Replacing Congressman Brad Wenstrup, David Taylor, Representative Congressman Taylor. Welcome to the 55 KRC Morning Show. It's a real pleasure to have you on the program today. Congratulations on the victory, and of course representing Ohio District 2. It's a sizable district. Remind my listeners of your background, because you have a very impressive background that obviously qualifies you eminently for the job, because most notably you run your own small business, but you also were a former prosecutor.
Yeah, Brian, that's right. I started out as an assistant prosecutor in Claremont County, and did that for a number of years before taking over the family business in 1999, which is Sardine Ready Mix, located in Brown County. Been in business in my family for 50 years now, and stayed involved with the prosecutor's office over the years since then, and helped out where I could. And yeah, I think it's important to have more people with a business background in Washington, and I'm glad to say that in this incoming Congress, a lot of the new members don't have lifetime of political service. A lot of them are in businesses of different kinds, of widely varied backgrounds, which is, I think that's the goal.
Well, and I think the important component of it is not just that you know how to run business, it's how life actually works, as opposed to how government works, which isn't responsible for generating any revenue and having to be accountable for the American dollar. You either earn your living and have a successful operation, or you lose the business. And so I think that's an important sort of reality component that some people just sort of miss out on.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers have to work out in the private sector, and all they have to do is print some more money here in Washington, unfortunately, and we've seen how they've leaned on that.
Well, let me just get your reaction to the just flurry of activity coming out of the Trump administration. I've been saying Donald Trump hit the ground sprinting. We haven't seen this much activity, and I would argue all positive. In my lifetime, I don't think.
I couldn't agree more. It's we all expected him to come out of the gate strong, but I think everybody's surprised by just how prepared the administration was to go forward, and how quickly it's happened. And as you said, many positive things happening here. And it was sort of, as a new congressman, I feel like we need to get busy catching up with him. And a lot of executive orders, doing a lot of good things, undoing a lot of previous policies from the outgoing administration. But if we don't go behind him and codify those things into law, then the next time we have a Democrat in the White House, those things they'll just be another flurry of executive orders, and I don't think that's how the United States is supposed to be governed. No,
I'm not a big fan of the so-called imperial presidency, but we've been stuck in a quagmire for so long. Right. Congress hasn't been able to get anything done. If Republicans says yes, Democrats say no. It doesn't matter what the idea is. It's just that there's this obstructionism that goes on based upon party affiliation. But since you mentioned it, and one of the obviously executive orders that bore some great fruit on behalf of the American people, regardless of the political stripe, is cracking down on the border. I mean, one of the reasons Donald Trump won, and by a large margin, including the popular vote, is because this border security thing was just insane. Biden welcomed people, and in fact encouraged people from the four corners of the globe to come to the United States, overwhelming even the most blue Democratic cities, to the point where the citizenry there was screaming at the top of their lungs to make it stop. But border crossings down 90%. I read that this morning. But it's something that the next administration, if God forbid we elect a Democrat president, could immediately undo. So what is your codify into law solution? Do you have one? Are you working on legislation to put something into law?
Yes, sir. The one we've started with, and I'm encouraging, my fellow congressmen to do the same. I've started with trying to our first bill to codify the president's executive order to remove 10 federal regulations for every one that's added. Very lucky to have Rick Scott heading that or leading that in the Senate. No one disagrees that we have a bloated federal regulatory structure. In fact, a member of my staff spoke to Congressional Research Service last year, just trying to get an idea of when he was working for someone else out here, just to try to get an idea of how many federal regulations there were, and we're basically told that's not even knowable. There's just so many we could not possibly give you a count. So Obviously, it's not a law that would need to be in effect forever, but it would probably need to be in effect for a number of years to sort of all the unwieldy and often very negative federal regulations.
Well, if anybody's seen the Code of Federal Regulations, I mean, it's volumes of books. I mean, it's just it's a sight to behold when you look at it, and then when you start reading it, it's the kind of thing that makes your eyes gloss over because it's just so complex. And one regulation will reference another one, and so in order to understand it, you got to go to the other regulation. Right. It's just mind-boggling.
Right. I was talking to one of my fellow freshman class members, and I said it takes a long time to walk past it, much less read it.
Yeah, and that's when we hear about these omnibus bills being passed, and I wish it would be back to the regular order of business with 12 annual appropriations bill, which is part of the job description. But you get an omnibus bill, it's 1,200, 1,500 pages long, and you can't understand it because it mentions changes to regulations which aren't fully spelled out in the omnibus, which means you got to go back to the Code of Federal Regulations and have that handy to understand what's sitting in front of you. But ultimately, it's only out there for like 3 days. So even if you could read it cover to cover and understand it, which you literally cannot, no one does.
No, exactly right. And I want to assure you that we're working hard to make sure we do the appropriations bills and operate under a budget this year. Obviously, the March 14th deadline's coming up, but our goal is to be operating under a budget as was intended this fiscal year.
Which committees are you on, if I may ask, Congressman?
Absolutely. I was very lucky in that regard. The two committees I thought were most helpful for the folks in my district are agriculture and transportation and infrastructure, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen for both of those. We targeted agriculture because there are 11,000 family farms in the district, and not only and they're struggling under the lack of a farm bill that's been kicked down the road 2 years running now, and I do believe we're going to get that across the finish line this year. I think we're in a good spot starting out. But also, the Agriculture Committee has some jurisdiction over the rural connectivity issue, and that's a huge problem in the second district. Large swaths of the district aren't not meaningfully connected to the internet, which means they're not meaningfully connected to the modern economy. So that was sort of my first priority in the district was that if you get that domino to fall, I think you start tipping over a lot more because it's an all Appalachian district now. They have every need in a very acute way that you can imagine.
Yes.
But I think that gives them accessibility to a lot of those issues.
Well, I do. I come from sort of related to farm stock. I mean, my great grandparents and my great uncles were farmers in the Tennessee area. My wife grew up on a dairy farm in rural Pennsylvania, and I understand the hardships associated with being a dairy farmer, most notably a small dairy farmer. That is a tough life. And since you're involved with the agriculture area and sector, and on that committee, I gotta walk into dangerous waters here, but I am no fan of burning up corn in my gas tank, and I don't think there's any need for it. It's all predicated on climate change or something, and I don't know if I understand how or why it is a good thing to burn up food in cars, and yet we pay subsidies and encourage farmers to do exactly that because of the ethanol mandates. Where are you on that topic? And feel free to disagree with me or explain why I'm wrong.
Brian, I'm learning about that. I've heard from both sides in a little bit of time I've been here. I know they were talking about sustainable aviation fuels and trying to see ways that it can be positively used. But I've got a lot more to learn about that. But I am in the process of trying to get my arms around that issue. I know it's a hot button topic between farmers and people who are against it. So the farmers mostly are for it. So, yeah, it's something I'm digging into, but not something I've got a position on yet.
All right. Well, I appreciate that and your honesty in that regard. But I think the corollary to that is the problem we have with corn syrup. And I think RFK Jr., if he does end up getting his position confirmed, is going to shine a whole lot of light on that most notable problem in our diets. Dave, pivoting over to some of the legislation you're sponsoring and dealing with the border. Again, if I maybe go back to that just for a moment, Remain in Mexico Act and Finish the Wall Act. Those are two things that obviously, if they were signed into law, would have a level of permanence that executive orders do not.
Right, and I think that's going to be the goal of this Congress to get, sort of follow in the wake of these executive orders and try to get them codified into law, and so that they're longer lasting. And the good part here is, as you mentioned earlier, that we're seeing the positive effect of these executive orders in short order. So that will make those bills easier to pass. So I think as much as you and I don't love the executive order, they are going to be helpful in actually legislating in this case. So, I mean, that's a positive. Well,
and the other positive is moving away to things that don't have a permanence. But Elon Musk, and I keep reading all these angry leftist posts, he's an unelected official. He's not doing anything but identifying the fraud, waste, and abuse in government so that folks like you, Congressman Taylor, can hopefully do something about it. He's been very effective in that regard lately.
I couldn't agree more. What we've seen from the Democrats since Doge especially was looking at USAID is they seem to think that people are more worried about how we found out that USAID funds leftist propaganda and international terror than they are that USAID funds leftist propaganda and international terror.
I know.
I think that the public at large is a little more worried that it's happening than how it finds out. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with the president appointing someone to look at what's going on within his bureaucracies. And this, USAID was enacted by executive order by John F. Kennedy. So if the president wants to look at it again, he's more than within his rights to do so.
Well, and I'm quick to point out, I don't recall anyone electing Dr. Fauci when he was running the ship out there in terms of our medical care and COVID, among other things, and funding gain of function research at the Institute of Virology in Wuhan.
Absolutely true. And the idea that to be involved in the processes of government, you have to be elected. Well, we'd be down to under 600 people out here. Maybe that would be a good thing. But
maybe. You're onto something on that. Well, the other thing is I've always been an advocate for some measure of school choice. Obviously, I don't think anyone can argue that our public schools seem to be failing our children. And this is not intended to be an indictment on teachers themselves. They've got a tough job. But the scores are going down. The children are no longer thinking along the lines of critical thinking. We're failing in reading and mathematics. I see that you're behind getting rid of the Department of Education. Do you think that will have some sort of effect on allowing students and families to make greater choices in their education?
I think that's just one of many benefits that would flow from the elimination of the Department of Education. The terrible policies that are top down pushed from the federal level to schools in our states are uniformly ineffective to harmful. They sort of range in that narrow range. So not only would the local state and local schools have more resources, but we'd be able to have, as you said, more opportunities for school choice. I mean, Ohio does a great job with the voucher system, but it can be a lot better. Like with more resources in the state, my district, which has fewer, school choice options, would be able to have more school choice options. So, yeah, I know Congressman Massey has proposed this before, and God love him for it, and I've always been for it. But this time around, it looks like it's got some traction from the White House as well. So now seems like the time.
It does seem like the time. And before we part company, I've just got to ask you, Congressman Taylor, about the amendment, proposing the amendment to the Constitution to limit the numbers of the terms of members of Congress. I would think that you probably, even within the Republican Party, might have some opposition to that because, well, that would eliminate their jobs.
Well, there's what's right and there's what's right. I think that we need to address the situation of term limits. I'm for term limits, absolutely. I've co-signed a bill to that effect, and maybe the amendment. But you're right; it's hard to get people to vote against their own job. But in the language in the bill is such that you sort of exempt the people that are already here. So